Good morning. I'm live. Sasha Mint Grace here. It is the 3rd of March, 2023, and we're going to start chapter 32 of Hope's Kiss, Not a Romance. District Attorney Delbert Mansfield pulled several file folders from his briefcase and began exploring the contents as they waited for the defense lawyer to arrive. It promised to be a long day as there were over 20 jurors to screen. With any luck, they'd agree on 12 individuals by the end of the day. He studied his day planner. He was supposed to be at an appointment with his family lawyer right now. He wished he'd been able to get the visit with his lawyer done before this, though. This would be the final reading of his father's last wishes. He hated to be reminded of the situation of his father's death. It was such a black eye on the family's pride. He noticed that Mark Bridges had arrived. They greeted each other, and Mark nodded to the court stenographer, and the process commenced. First up was a woman in her 60s. The court bailiff began the selection process with standard questions that by rights should all have already been screened before the juror was called up to serve, but just in case something was missed, this was doubly checked. The bailiff asked the woman to swear in the Bible that she was at least 18, a citizen of the USA, able to read and understand the English language, and a resident of the United States. Then she asked if the woman had ever been convicted of an indictable offense in any state or federal court. Here the woman stumbled and asked, "What's an indictable offense?" The bailiff stopped and thought about this for a moment and then responded, "Indictable means a crime for which a grand jury rules there's enough evidence to charge defendant with a felony, a crime punishable by death or a term in a state penitentiary. This crime could be murder, manslaughter, rape, kidnapping, grand theft, robbery, burglary, arson, conspiracy, fraud, and other major crimes as well as attempts to commit them." The possible juror laughed and said, "No, of course not. I'm a good law-abiding citizen." The bailiff shook her head in annoyance and carried on. "Do you have any physical or mental disability which would prevent you from properly serving as a juror?" The woman shook her head. The bailiff reminded her that she needed to give a verbal answer. "No." The bailiff continued, "This trial is expected to last for 3 months. Is there anything about the length or scheduling of the trial that would interfere with your ability to serve?" The woman in the box counted on her fingers and contemplated the dates. She began to shift in the seat then and replied, "Damn, my daughter's wedding is in 2 months. I have to be there for the planning of it. It would break her heart if I missed that day." Then she slumped back on the seat in disappointment. The bailiff said, "You're dismissed, Mrs. Smart." The woman stood, sighed, and removed herself. During the process, the next citizen interviewed made it to the question, "Do you have any medical, personal, financial problem that would prevent you from serving on this jury?" He stuttered, "I'm supposed to start a new job on Wednesday. I really need this position. My family would be hurt if I didn't show up for this job." The bailiff announced, "You're dismissed." He heaved a huge sigh of relief and left. The next prospective juror was a girl until he was asked the question, "Do you personally know either of the lawyers or the parties involved, or has any of them or anyone in their office ever represented you or brought any action against you? Do you know MJ or Marie Jean Hope?" Here the individual showed recognition and pleasure. "Wow, is this a trial for the terrorist Canadian chick? Cool." The bailiff went on, "So you've been following this case in the news?" The man answered, "Of course, hasn't everyone? It's better than listen to all that horrible stuff about the environment and toxic waste and suicide, assisted and otherwise." Just shaking his head, the defense lawyer caught the bailiff's eye. The bailiff sniffed and announced, "Dismissed." The following citizen lasted until the list of potential witnesses was read. When asked if he knew any of the potential witnesses, he answered, "Yes, I do. Your computer analysis geek is my sister-in-law." Bailiff announced, "Dismissed." Several of the interviewees managed to get through all the screening questions and were approved by both the defense and district attorney. A number were disqualified at this question. "Do you know anything about this case from any source other than what I've just told you?" Some were rejected at this question. "Are you familiar with the area or address of the incident because the news had broadcast loud and clear that MJ had been arrested in the speakeasy on 777 Yonge Street?" Some of the questioned failed the screening on purpose at this question. "Based on what I have told you, is there anything about this case or the nature of the claim itself that would interfere with your ability to be fair and impartial and to apply the law as instructed by the court?" One woman went as far to say, of course she's guilty. She's a ringleader. It's obvious. Look at her lifestyle. She's a lesbian that smokes pot and tried to seduce kids. The bailiff sighed tiredly and pronounced, dismissed. Others floundered at this question. Can you accept the laws explained by the court and apply it to facts regardless of your personal beliefs about whether the law is or should be? One of the citizens responded, I believe what's been done by our government is a grave injustice. This is nothing less than invasion of privacy. Mark Bridges held his breath, waiting to see if the district attorney would veto this one. The DA spoke softly into the bailiff's ear. The bailiff shook her head and said, dismissed. The questioned couldn't get out of the courtroom fast enough. Everyone remaining answered the next two queries appropriately. Have you ever served on a trial jury before today? Do you know anyone else in the jury box other than as a result of reporting here today? Several were rejected by this answer too. Would your verdict in this case be influenced in any way by any factors other than the evidence in the courtroom, such as friendships, family relationships, the type of work you do? One woman said she couldn't really answer that question until she knew more about the case. One man who lost his brother in 9/11 claimed he probably couldn't be trusted. Now we would like to learn a little bit about each of you. Please tell us of the work you do, whether you've ever done any type of work which is substantially different from what you do now, whether you served in the military, what's your educational history, who else lives in your household and the type of work they do, if any, whether you have any children living elsewhere and the type of work they do, which television shows you watch, any sources from which you learn the news, example, newspapers, radio, TV, news stations you listen to. If you have a bumper sticker that does not pertain to a political candidate, what does it say? What do you do in your spare time and anything else you feel is important? The remaining selections answered the questions, none were rejected. Finally, the bailiff asked each juror, is there anything whether or not covered in the previous questions which would affect your ability to be a fair and impartial juror in this way be a problem for you serving on this jury? They all gave the appropriate answer. The bailiff sighed in relief and checked the wall clock. She told them to pick up the papers on the way out that would give them the details of the time and place of the trial. Mark went across the room to the DA and said, well, congratulations. Look like we have a decent gang. What did you whisper to the bailiff? I asked if she could leave that guy just to give a bit of balance for the two fundamentalists that passed screening. I thought that would only be fair. They gave the appropriate answer, but it's obvious they want to see a client burned at the stake. Mark said softly, thanks for trying. You're probably right about those people. Chapter 23. MJ stared out the window of the car her lawyer had arrived in. She was tired, sore, and stiff from not resting properly because of fibromyalgia. She'd hoped that the movies were accurate about the availability of pot inside, but so far, all she'd been offered was alcohol or pharmaceutical preparations. Maybe she hadn't met the right people. The one she'd asked had said that the pot was so stinky it was too risky. So far, none of the violence portrayed in TV about prison life had occurred. Her biggest stress was limited freedom and missing Carrie. Mark politely inquired, how are you? Did they give you something to help you sleep? She shook her head. He said, pardon? She answered no, then added, do you have any idea how long the trial will take? A rough estimate? This time he shook his head. That's unpredictable. It depends on what evidence and witnesses the prosecution presents. She went on, do you have any experience with Canadian clients in this situation? He looked down at his car's gauges, hesitated, and answered, no. She sat back in the seat and rested her elbow on the car door, chin on her right hand, sighed long and painful, muttering, wonderful, just wonderful, under her breath. She wondered what her friends back home were thinking, wondered if any of them believed she was a terrorist. She drifted away mentally, recalling, perceiving reality and what was happening to her. Recalling the video, perceiving reality and what was happening to her. She remembered that the narrator described us as a closed box with 5 senses of perception. Each piece of information is screened and interpreted by a subjective picture controlled by a preset program. That program is ego. The ego measures perception up in terms of pleasure or pain, desiring the first and rejecting the second. We experience our life in that limited way, but we really can't perceive reality because we're in this box with just 5 openings for perception. She yawned. She shifted her chin into her other hand, resting her elbow on the car's console. I can't see the big picture, she thought. There must be some reason this is happening. She just couldn't see it. If she didn't believe that everything happened for a reason, she'd really be freaking out right now. Mark asked, "What's the deal with that online educational institute? Do you get a certificate? Can you make money when you've completed the courses? Do they hire you afterwards?" MJ offered, "No certificate, no money or job, at least not in the traditional sense." "What do you mean by that? Why do you waste your time at it then?" Number one, it's not a waste of time. And two, why does everything have to be about money? Can anybody just do something for the simple satisfaction of learning? All my life, I wished and dreamed I was dedicated enough to become a master of the source, to learn how to make a flame grow from the palm of my hand. I never doubted it could be accomplished if I was willing to apply the time and discipline required. But alas, I knew I'd never be that dedicated or willing to give up a normal life to get this ability. But what I've learned since I began to study this philosophy, this science is far vaster than I ever could have imagined. I believe I have learned about reality and my place in it. I've learned about the origin of it all, the reason for this condition of humanity, and beyond that. I've seen a group of people working together to bring our current condition to a close and to bloom into what humanity already is but has forgotten. I learned that our species has and will go through different stages of trying to find contentment through money, property, knowledge, and recognition. All these aspirations will be ultimately unsatisfying. It's only through our emptiness that we can sense that there is something greater than us and desire it, and therefore begin to seek it and understand just how limited this little box of five perceptions is. Mark raised his eyebrows and said, "Wow, that was quite a mouthful. I had no idea you were so deep. How do you know all this stuff they spoke factual?" "Well, it could have something to do with the fact the main teacher is first a scientist, and the fact that I know a bit about science myself. I was taught in the 70s that the nucleus of a cell was a brain that determined a cell's functions. But science has learned that's not right. In fact, the membrane between all the cells in an organism is what contains its executive functions. In other words, the cells aren't individual and separate, but each one works for the glory of the whole organism, like fractals, systems theory. It's same as macro as micro, right? Fractals. Thus, all is connected within the one. Quantum physics is backing this up. Have you seen what the bleep? Mark shook his head. Too heavy for me. Well, that should wrap this up for another week, and hopefully we'll see you on Monday.